If you thought about a few of the things from last session, a few of those principles of the SAFE system, and starting to hone us in on that assessment methodology and the exposure, the likelihood and the severity of crashes. So just remind you, we're recording the session, so anybody who misses it can view that later on. And so, yeah, but as I said, you can't speak and we can't see you, but feel free to put your hand up if you want to have a bit of discussion, and Kathy will unmute you, or at any point type things into the chat, and we'll get to those. I'm going to just pop up a few slides, if that's all right. Kathy, do you want to cover anything administratively off while I get this up and running?
I think everyone's doing a great job with jumping on and completing the quiz in Schoology, so thank you. And there'll be another one after today's session, as well as a little assignment, but Ken will go through that later on in the session. And we've got your slides up and running, Ken, well done.
Good, thanks, Kathy. Yeah, so I'm going to run through a few slides, and then there's fairly early on a little bit of an exercise for you to start further solidifying in your mind that categorization of exposure, likelihood and severity for infrastructure in order to get us on the right path for doing safe system assessments. So this module is all about the kinetic energy thresholds of different crash types at intersections. And we started talking about that last week, but this one we go into a little bit more detail and start to unpack a few more elements of that. That is critical to a safe system assessment. So we look at the severity of a crash or a predicted crash, and we try to understand and score that in a fairly broad brush way, but nonetheless, we're trying to quantify the severity of outcome of crashes. We are going to have a look at intersection characteristics that align highly with safe system principles, and characteristics of mid-block locations, so between intersections, that align highly with safe system principles. And I suppose by default, we're going to look at some things that don't align that highly with safe system principles for both of those. You'll notice there that I talk about aligning highly with safe system principles or not aligning highly with safe system principles. I don't say, we'll look at how an intersection is safe system or is not safe system. I mean, that's a bit of a trap that people often fall into, to think that safe system is some binary thing where it is either yes, it's safe system, or no, it's not. We know that the safe system is a philosophy, and it's a spectrum, and so you're going to get things that align highly with safe system principles. They could align even higher, and things that don't align well with safe system principles or align less. In the early days and the evolution of the safe system in Australia and New Zealand, there was, I think, some mistakes made where people would say, well, is that project safe system? And I sort of thought, that's a somewhat unintelligible question. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. I suppose in theory, and there's some mythical thing that would have perfect alignment with safe system principles, but the majority of everything we're doing at this stage is trying to get us closer aligned with safe system principles. So I think the safe system assessment framework is a wonderful tool from that perspective, because it is a scoring, and it shows that you can move things closer to safe system. It doesn't mean they're perfect alignment with safe system principles. It doesn't mean we're absolutely guaranteeing no death and serious injury, but we're getting much, much closer to that alignment. So we'll talk about that. But I really strongly encourage you to put into your vocabulary aligns highly or doesn't align highly, rather than that is safe system or that is not safe system, because you'll probably get called out on that at some stage. Don't forget to count the wallies in the slides. Again, that'll be a quiz question. So I talked to you, and I showed this yesterday, and I grabbed it from here and I popped it into the first set of slides, which was a little bit not following what your PDF notes are, but I wanted to do it to set that context. We saw road safety audit, design review, safe system assessments, safety and design, and the DDA, or Disability Discrimination Act audits and those sort of things, and the overlap with them. And really, I mean, we're going to be spending our time today looking at this safe system assessment framework, but some of the stuff you'll definitely see really interacts in there with what you know as road safety auditors, for those that are road safety auditors, and it's very familiar processes, and analysing designs and the network in terms of that safety lens. The additional stuff out here that sort of doesn't, isn't within a road safety audit. It's a lot of the stuff associated with quantifying, scoring, categorizing things, and categorizing both the issues that are being identified, but also the recommendations that are being made into their principal safe system recommendations, or supporting safe system recommendations. We'll get into that, and I think a lot of you will be, I suppose, quite comfortable with a lot of the stuff we're talking about, because it is in the infrastructure space pretty much. Of course, there is interaction between the other elements of the system, which we'll talk about, but the last module was more that general principles and all of those elements, and we've sort of now grabbed an element and we're working with that. So I'm going to start with intersections, and I'll move to mid-blocks shortly after, but I'll be asking you a number of different questions as we go. I've popped this slide up. There's a lot of words on this slide. I don't like a slide with this many words, but I did grab it directly out of a Monash University Accident Research Centre report. It's a little bit old, that report, 10 years old now, but nonetheless, the principles are really good in terms of how things align with safe system principles. So at an intersection, we can get better alignment with safe system principles by looking at fewer vehicles through the intersection, right? And so that I'm going to put a little E next to, because that's an exposure one. We're changing the exposure to crashes. So fewer intersections also being an exposure one. So if we can have fewer intersections and consolidate them, we remove the exposure at some intersections. We may increase the exposure at other intersections, but I suppose there's a hidden assumption there that it's a safer intersection that you're looking at. Fewer conflict points per intersection. Now, in a very traditional road safety sense, that would be an exposure element. However, in the formulation of the safe system assessment framework and the protocols we use in that, the decision was made that this really is better placed as a likelihood factor. So we'll put an L there. Okay, so I'm sure some of you will be very tempted when you're categorizing to say the number of conflict points is the exposure to crashes. And I can completely understand why you're doing that. And I certainly did that in my career and for other things. But just under that safe system assessment framework, that will influence the likelihood. The exposure is really just driven by the number of vehicles, the number of pedestrians, or the number of cyclists. There's a little bit more clarity that's been produced after the Austroad Safe System Assessment Framework. And so I suggest you have a look at the Victorian guidelines or the South Australian guidelines, which sort of hone into this. And we're going to send you out some fact sheets to help you on this scoring, so it's really clear in your mind. And what we did is we took a number of topics which were a bit grey and a bit blurred in the Austroads guidelines, and the and industry was a little confused, and we just made a fact sheet on those to help solidify it in people's mind. Then we get into, after this, the speeds and impact angles at an intersection, and trying to keep those within the biomechanically tolerable limits. And we talked about those sorts of limits last week a little bit. And we talked about that 50 kilometers per hour for the 90-degree crashes between passenger vehicles. We want to get it below that if we can. And then for other angles between outside that 90, we can sort of go somewhere between the 50 and the 70, which would be the head-on or the rear end. And then the reason for that is you can get some deflection of energy into the environment. It's the old vectors from your year 10 physics class, if you cast your mind back, and we know that in vectors we can push a bit of energy out into the environment there if you get more angles, and more energy is directed out to the environment. When we get vulnerable road users involved, we're looking at that 30 km/h or below. When we can't achieve that, we need to look to alter things to try to lessen the risk or remove the exposure to crashes. So I'm going to delve into that in a bit more, but the thing with a safe system assessment is that you're trying to put a score between 0 and 4 into your severity outcome. And we know that, we know where some of these thresholds lie, but they're just giving you an indication of how you might score it. So I think you'll get your head around this once you start doing it. And it's always the best way to learn is to get out there and start doing these things. And you're going to have that opportunity within the next few modules to be out there doing it. But this is just giving you some base thinking on severity of crashes. Here's a table, and you'll see it's just what I've said there, 50, 90 degree. These are for passenger vehicles, crashes at intersection. 60 km/h, somewhere in this range. This is where things start to get really bad after these, really bad really quickly with speeds after these. And this one's from ChemX, which is the Kinetic Energy Management Model, or XChemX is the new version of that. That's a really refined, detailed tool for assessing severity of crashes at intersections. It is far beyond what you will need doing safe system assessments. Okay, you're going to get a broad brush set of, I suppose, calibration in your mind of the severity of crashes, and you don't need to run the XChemX model in there, not at all. You'll be able to just look at an intersection, get a general idea of angles, vehicles, the crash types, and get an idea from these different tables that I'm providing of is it going to be really bad? Is it going to be, could be bad, or is it going to be, well, it's likely to be minor injury or property damage or the like. 70 km/h is our rear end head-on sort of threshold limit. I mean, rear end's an interesting beast in terms of severity outcomes, and there's there's a fair bit of work being done out of the University of Adelaide to try and get more clarity around some of this with different things. But for now, we just keep it generally around that 70 km/h. It says 80 km/h here, not feasible. Now that is an 80 km/h change in speed. Okay, so you can crash at 80 km/h and have very survivable outcomes, as long as this is 2 passenger vehicles. The speeds are somewhat similar. So you could be going 80 on an on-ramp, be struck by a vehicle going 100, and that initial impact, the severity levels will be very, very low. You've got to think obviously about the secondary impact of how that goes there, but that initial impact is because that's the change in speed and the change in energy that we're interested in. Now, you won't need to go to these very minute details of getting exact angles that crashes could occur, because you can get a general idea that you can say, oh, well, this coming out here, that's pretty much going to be a right angle, and we'll take about the 90 degree on that and the 50 km/h. And okay, this one's somewhere in between, so we can probably think around the 60 km/h is where it really picks up. So don't think you need to go into extremely precise details within a safe system assessment. Now, I see there's a hand up there, I think, Kathy. I might just pause there and see. We've got Eng there. G'day, Eng.
Yeah, thanks, Ken. I just want to, based on what you have presented in the earlier two slides, there has been some discussion regarding, roundabouts for safety for cyclists in particular. In the general traffic engineering guidelines, we tend to say that roundabout reduces the angle of the impact, as well as reducing the number of conflict points compared to a normal cross intersection. But then if you look at the Bicycle Network website, they tend to say that they don't like roundabouts at all in terms of providing safe intersection for cyclists. So just want to hear your views on those.
It's a wonderful question. And I suppose if you look back to this one, we see there that I suppose the cyclists and pedestrians were sat out on their own, and they're not associated with an angle as such. So because you don't get that advantage you get from passenger vehicle angle deflection of energy because of the vulnerable road users. So what we do is this table is really just for passenger vehicles.
Okay.
And then I've got a table, I think, next week where we talk about including the pedestrians and cyclists in there. And really you just take that 30 kilometre per hour really as the exponential increase, regardless of angle or the like. There's a bit of work being done in trying to understand some of the severity outcomes of crashes with cyclists in bike lanes or facilities where they're travelling along at speed and they're struck from behind, and how that plays out. But cyclists and pedestrians have a multitude of challenges associated with being run over by different vehicle types. And we can see some fairly low speed things happen that have very severe outcomes. Yeah, so we'll talk a bit next week about, in fact, next week is all about pedestrians, cyclists and motorcyclists and facilities with them. So I'm going to delve more into that then, but I really appreciate you mentioning it to clarify in everybody's mind. We're talking on this table, passenger vehicle crashes.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. And everybody else, there's a great example of how you can pop your hand up and we can talk directly to you and we can clarify a few things. And I really encourage that. Or feel free to chuck it into the chat and we'll get to it as we go.
Can we just, there's a comment from earlier on as well when you're talking about intersections where Wade's asking, aren't fewer intersections also fewer conflict points?
Well, yes. Well, you eliminate all the conflict points of that of the intersection you remove in one way or another. So you're spot on, Wade. Absolutely. So you could sort of clarify it in that. I suppose the intent within the MUARC document was thinking more things like making it a left in, left out style treatment, or alterations to make it like a roundabout with less conflict points. So you've got an intersection there, but it's just got less conflict points. But you're spot on. I mean, it's less by going to zero. Collision angles. So we talked about angles and vectors and the like, but I also just wanted to mention secondary impacts, and I briefly mentioned that. But often at an intersection, which we're talking about now, we'll see the rate of crashes of lane departure, so run off road or even head on, can sometimes go up a bit. And this is because, yes, we might get a vehicle that comes out comes out here, and the vehicle with priority then avoids or clips or there's turbulence going on at that location, and we often have power poles, signal poles, other roadside features around the intersection, drainage, culverts, and all sorts of things. It's quite a spot for infrastructure. And so when you're doing a safe system assessment, while you might be considering the intersection, and there's different definitions of what an intersection is, back to right of way and those sorts of things. But regardless of that, in a safe system assessment, you're thinking about the crash type. It doesn't particularly matter where it's happened on the network. So it could have happened at the intersection, but if it was this vehicle and there was a vehicle coming here, and this one had to, went to avoid, and there was a head-on crash, even though it happened right in the intersection, you would classify that and categorize it and score it as a head-on crash in your scoring matrix. So what we often see in a safe system assessment is that if you're doing a route or something, that the intersections actually step up the runoff road risk a little bit, as well as obviously the intersection risk is there because it's an intersection. The second thing here is a diagram that the Centre for Automotive Safety Research in Adelaide came up with after a lot of investigation of different crashes, and they're talking about secondary impacts here. And you see, here's a vehicle, and this is the intersection point, and it's shaded where the secondary impacts are occurring. Pretty obvious stuff, I think, isn't it? That you're going to get the crashes out there, but you do get them in other locations. But there are quite a few of secondary impacts there. So you will be referring back to this and some more information I'm going to provide you to aid you in scoring severity. I'm going to get you to do an exercise shortly, but you're going to have to remember the exposure, the likelihood, and the severity, because what I'm going to ask you to do is come up with ideas on treatments, but put them into the categories of, is that influencing the exposure to crashes, so the number of vehicles that are going through the intersection? Is that influencing the likelihood of crashes? So features that may influence that are things like the line marking, signage, sight distance, or the like, or is it going to influence the severity in terms of the speeds, the angles, the vulnerability of road users out there, the types of crash, side impact, or that, is it a point source hazard like a tree or a power pole, or is it a wider hazard that they might be rolling over, or the like? So you're going to be asked to categorize anything you come up with. So it's not going to be just as easy as coming up with ideas. You're going to have to start categorizing them. And that's what you have to do in a safe system assessment anyway. So I'm going to use this random intersection as an example. And, we could have picked anything, but here we go. We've got an intersection here. It's on a major arterial road. It's got 19,000 vehicles a day. Can I write that there? So 19,000 vehicles a day. It's got 11% heavy vehicles. It's a B double route. It's taken big vehicles. It's got buses. That's a bus stop there. 2 lanes in each direction. 70 kilometers per hour is the speed limit, and it's about the 85th percentile, somewhere around that 70. So it's generally that. So the side road here is much lower volume, so it's only got 1,200 vehicles a day, and it's only 3% commercial vehicles, and they're predominantly service vehicles, the rubbish truck and those sorts of things, and the buses that go to a school down here. And the school's about 400 meters, 500 meters down the road there. This is a big drainage culvert thing. Looks like a lot of water coming from somewhere that goes under there. This is a shared path facility here. You can see sort of a bit of a Danish offset crossing here, a Z crossing, as some people call it, where you, and what else can I tell you? This is a 2-way service road here, just really access for the houses. 50 kilometre per hour default speed limit on the side road. Now, what I'm going to get you to do is get this intersection to align much more highly with safe system principles, as high alignment as you can possibly get. But I am going to put some constraints on you. I know you wanted complete freedom to do absolutely anything you wanted, but I'm going to put some constraints on you. The first constraint I'm going to put on you is that there's been lots of consultation with all these residents in the residential houses, a residential area. Unfortunately, the time it would take them to get out to access via other routes means that we cannot close this intersection. And we can't eliminate those conflict points, as Wade said. We need to actually provide access in all moves. They need to be able to turn left and right out and turn in via left turn and right turn. And they can't go too far up either direction to make a U-turn on the light. So we've pretty much got to leave this fairly open. So that's constraint one. Constraint number two is dollars. So I brought you back to reality with a budget. And I'm going to give you a budget of $2.8 million. $2.8 million. You can do whatever you want, but it's got to be within that. Now, if you want a cost estimation, I can give that to you. So just type in what you're thinking. So I don't know if you wanted to say remove all trees, and you could type that in and just say remove all trees cost, and I will come back with a dollar figure for you, an estimation. So that will that's your budget. And whoa, what have I done? That's your budget. And the final one is that you are operating in the current political, organizational, and community environment in which you currently work. Okay, so if you're, putting forward something that's very radical, very, I want a bit of a plan as to how you might actually get that onto the ground, or run that campaign, or whatever you're planning, because that's real world. So I want you to try and think through all of that and come up with treatments, and then categorize anything that you recommend in terms of this will influence the exposure to crashes, or this will influence the likelihood or the severity, or maybe a combination. Now, does anybody have any questions about the intersection, about the scenario at this stage?
We've got some requests for your instant quoting system, Ken.
All right, let's do it.
Roundabout cost, please.
Roundabout's going to be $5.4 million to get a full-sized roundabout at this location. It involves service relocation, property acquisition, big works. 5.4 million. You can't afford a full-size roundabout.
Okay, we've got 2 lots of lights cost, so a pedestrian crossing and traffic lights costing as well.
Yep, traffic lights 1.9 million for a standard set of traffic signals at this location, and just a pedestrian set of pedestrian signals by themselves we're going to get for $955,000.
A pedestrian overpass?
Pedestrian overpass, 2.1 million. Yeah. In order to make it DDA compliant and everything that we need to do for that pedestrian overpass, it's there's a fair bit to do.
Okay. Intersection traffic lights. 950 was the pedestrian overpass.
Oh, no.
No?
Pedestrian signals were 950.
Oh,
Pedestrian
sorry.
operated signals only.
Yep.
No, the pedestrian overpass was 2.1 or so. You can
Sorry.
afford it.
Okay.
So,
I think we've got all the costs there so far.
okay, well, feel free to keep putting your cost estimates in. And remember, though, when you start typing in your ideas, I want them categorized: exposure, likelihood, severity. And you don't know much about this intersection, be great to stomp around out there and have a look and really get into the detail. But you know, just at this sort of high level, having a bit of think, how do we get really good alignment with safe system principles, and how are we getting that? Are we altering the exposure or the likelihood or the severity, or a combination?
Some more costs. A drain extension cost.
Yeah. So 120,000 to sort of, you know, extend the culvert on both sides, the drain, and yeah, we can get that done quite cheaply, relatively, I suppose. There's there's quite a bit of civil works there, but we can do that.
Okay, so we've got traffic lights. So the traffic lights keep coming up. Was the traffic lights intersection or just the side road? So where would we be putting the traffic lights? There. Okay.
Yeah, and I'll leave it up to you if you want to alter those service roads and what they do within your scheme of things.
Ooh, okay. So just a confirmation here, based on your costing, we can install a full traffic signal at this intersection for 1.9 million. Would that be about right?
Yep.
Okay. Can we get a cost on a set of slip lane construction on leg of T intersection?
So slip lane construction, just the slip lane. I don't know whether they want them in and out as well. That will add 500,000 to your costs for both legs, so about 250,000 each. And yeah, so I suppose a full signalised intersection with slip lanes on both, you can just scrape it in as long as you know, get your 3 quotes and make sure you've got everything nicely aligned and you're all good.
Okay, we've got some other people doing some cost estimates now. So Eng thinks a Wombat crossing to connect the service road, 50,000.
I think that sounds pretty good.
And what about bus stop relocation, 150?
Oh yeah, I reckon you can get a bit cheaper than that, but we'll go 100, 120, 150. Yep, that's yeah, that's pretty good.
We're looking for a cost for a right turn acceleration lane.
A right turn, or go down through the median here. I assume that's what they're asking for.
Let's confirm that. Oopsies. Yes, correct.
Yeah, so that's going to be 200,000 just to sort of create that. There's a little bit of work to be done and a little bit of configuration, but you know, something could be done, the 200, but to get, you know, something very elaborate and very long and the like, you're up into the 500,000.
Okay, I think everyone's having a think now.
Sorry, I just muted you there, Kathy. My bad.
That's okay, keeping me on my toes. Thank you, Ken.
So
I didn't have anything interesting to say. A U-turn cost, please. Oh, where are we putting the U-turn?
Yeah, that is a good question. Where is the U-turn going? U-turn cost
in median.
Okay, so somewhere down here, a U-turn facility. I think, you know, to get the right turn lane, the U-turn storage area and the like, we're up at 150, 200,000 to create that. Remembering though that there was one of your constraints is that people need to be able to access in, out, do all turns in a relatively easy manner. So we're not going to spend too much longer on this, but I want you to start popping your ideas now into the chat of, you know, I propose, and if you've got multiple things you're proposing, I want each of them categorized into exposure, likelihood, and severity. So if you want to say remove trees, which is likelihood, plus you know, remove the houses or something. I'm trying to think of things that you might not think, which would be a bit out of the ordinary. To open up sightlines, again, likelihood, but I'll let you put in whatever you want. So I'll give you, we'll give you a couple more minutes, and then we'll start seeing hopefully some ideas into the chat.
Is side road closure an option?
No, so that was what I said there before. We cannot close the side road. I like the thinking, and it aligns highly with safe system principles. However, we cannot close the side road off because of that access.
Okay, so 1 more minute, Ken.
1 more minute. So.
Wombat Crossing, I think we said was 50.
Yeah, 50 on the service roads there, or on any slip lanes that you're providing.
Thanks.
All right, let's start seeing some people popping it into the chat or the Q&A if you are unable to find the chat for some reason, although looks like a few of you are all good into the chat, and we're having a look as they come in. Yeah, feel free to do it to either all panelists and attendees. We're happy for you to share your ideas if you want with everybody, but starting to see them come in now, so thank you, and please type something in. Right, okay, starting to see some good stuff coming in now, and I'm loving the fact that we've got clear exposure, likelihood, severity categorization. This is excellent, thank you. Small median island cost, 50,000 on the side road there, I assume you mean, sort of like a splitter island. But if you mean a median island in the middle, again, you're going to have challenges with our ability to access in and out in all directions without moving them out of their way. I'll give you the last 15 seconds to, hit enter and throw that in, and then I'm going to just talk through a few of the things that are popping up, both in the effectiveness of the treatment or the like, but also in that categorization, which is the primary reason why we're going through this exercise is to ensure that categorization is clear in your mind. Thank you all for this input, and I must say, in just reading these, I'm feeling we've got a very knowledgeable group here in terms of what sort of things you could do at an intersection like this, which is good to see. So, all right, I'm seeing here we've got people who are talking about traffic signals and influencing the likelihood of crashes. And I've had a couple that have sort of put exposure with the traffic signals as well. One of them has clarified that by also saying that is because less traffic will use the intersections due to delays. Now, I will accept that as an exposure, but it's not then really about, it's about the number of vehicles that are using that intersection. As long as that's the thinking, which is was clarified there, that's fine. So different signage, warning signs. So traffic signals with fully controlled right turn phases, likelihood of crashes, yes, absolutely. And reduce the approach speed to 60 kilometers per hour, reduce the severity, that's right. And that will probably also reduce the likelihood a bit as well, because with speed, with slower speeds, you have more time to avoid crashes, to brake, and then the severity is also lower. So you get a bit of double benefit out of that. Tree removal, drainage protection, all severity. So the tree removal is a very interesting one. Removing trees is generally considered to be, yes, a likelihood reduction, because you leave the road, which under a safe system assessment, we don't categorize that as a crash until you hit something, and you know, it's really sort of a very clear crash. So if you leave the road and will manage to come back on, it's not considered a crash. So the likelihood with the removal is less. The fact of whether it's a rigid hazard like a tree or a power pole, or if it's a frangible, a slip-based light pole or something like that, influences on the severity. The exposure, though, is really driven by the number of vehicles using that route. So lots of support for signalization of this, and that's influencing the likelihood. So somebody's just mentioning they can't see anybody's comments. Yeah, so if you want it to be shared with everybody, you have to click on the little drop down and make it all panelists and attendees. So if you wanted everybody to see it, but we're seeing these come in just to all panelists, which is Kathy and myself. So lots of stuff there on signalization, moving the bus stop, and crossing points likelihood. Well done. That's right, because there's still the chance of a crash. Just feeling that if the bus stop is in a different location, it would lessen the likelihood of that crash. Extending the drain would be actually a likelihood one as well, because it wouldn't change the exposure to that crash. It would just lessen the likelihood because it would be further away. So that's a likelihood factor. Get in your mind pretty clearly that exposure is just based on the number of vehicles, the number of pedestrians, the number of cyclists. And in a safe system assessment, that is, it's pretty clear cut. Okay, so I've got, again, signalize the intersection. It is not going to influence the exposure unless you somehow believe it's going to fundamentally change travel patterns. It's just a likelihood reducer in general. Pedestrian crossing, likelihood, does nothing for exposure. So the number of pedestrians is about the exposure. Slip lane would actually probably alter the likelihood of crashes up a bit. Slip lanes aren't a real friend in road safety. the addition of a wombat crossing or the like on the slip lane then would bring things back. But thank you all for that input. I'm going to actually utilize a lot of that input as we go through a few more things, and we'll come back and talk a little bit more about this intersection. But thank you, that was great input, and I'm glad that most of you have got your head around this exposure, likelihood, and severity, because that's the meat of a safe system assessment, really. Well, you have to quantify a few things and the like. So, a number of you suggested traffic signals. As I said in there, that is a likelihood influencer. You're less likely to crash at an intersection if it is signalized. But when the crashes happen, they're often just as severe because they are red light runners, sometimes even more severe because they put the foot down to try and get through there. But people will miss the red light. They will run that red light. The angles are pretty bad. The number of conflict points are there. You'll notice here in my little diagram, which I pop up a lot, is that it does nothing for exposure. Now that's a common mistake for people when they're getting into safe system assessments, is to try to say, well, if we put a red light, then people aren't exposed to the crash. Well, they are when they run the red light. And that's part of the safe system, is to say that people are going to make mistakes. They're going to run that red light. We don't condone it. We're going to try and do everything we can to stop them doing that with good sight lines and LEDs and mast arms if we need, and all of that sort of stuff. But even you get all that right, unfortunately, people run the red light, and we need to start thinking about the severity of these crashes. And in fact, here's a little heat map I did of the outer metropolitan Melbourne area out in the southeast. I just picked any random one. I could have done this any city in Australia and any outer metro area, basically. And you see this is a fatal serious injury over a 10-year period, I think that took. But look at the hotspots. And I'm not going to give any prizes for this one, but these are all signalised intersections. That one, I suppose, is the approach to a signalised intersection. But we know the biggest source of death and serious injury at intersections across the country is large signalised intersections. So there's got to be something a little bit off with that, doesn't there? And why is it? Because people run the red lights. People make mistakes. People, are driving along, they miss it unintentionally. Some people are putting the foot down. We see all sorts of crashes happen at these intersections. The speeds are high. That's why I sort of picked the outer metro area, because the speeds are high. When you get into inner locations, the speeds are lower, and we've got more, like a lot more challenges with vulnerable road users and other things. We still see quite a bit of trauma, but the nature of it is you've got high volumes and conflict points, and a set of traffic signals isn't cutting it. In fact, Professor Jeremy Woolley from the Centre for Automotive Safety Research made a statement, which was a bit provocative, but he said, traffic signals are the biggest failure of traffic engineers. And he meant that from a road safety perspective. And the way that our industry has somewhat seen this as, pretty much the ultimate intersection, which, okay, great separation, obviously, beyond that. But it seemed to be in this evolution hierarchy where we went, different stop, give way, splitter islands and all of that, up to then maybe a roundabout when the volumes are low, and then it steps up to a signalised intersection, and then it might get grade separated down the track. Now that sort of managing traffic through these signals and having it as the end has sort of almost blinded us to the carnage that is happening at these locations. So we need to start addressing this. And a lot of you popped in their signals for some very thoughtful, I suppose, knowledge in a traffic engineering sense. But are we thinking about the outcomes there? Some of you started out by wanting a roundabout. And as En said there, the roundabout is an advantage from a road safety perspective in terms of lessening the conflict points, improving the angle of crashes, we traditionally need a large area for a roundabout in order to get large vehicles around that. So a big vehicle with a swept path to get around that needs quite a bit of space. And the bigger you make your roundabout, the easier that is to happen, obviously. So the costs start to blow out when we get these full-size roundabouts. But nonetheless, they provide great value. But do we need roundabouts as big as they are, is the question I pose. And some of you will sort of coil back at the sight of this and say, well, you can't do that. I mean, they'll take a straight line through that fast, and you know, you've lost all the advantages of the angles and all of these things. But let's not lose sight of, obviously this is a very different environment to the one we were looking at, but let's not lose sight of one thing in these sorts of environments with a roundabout. And it's pretty critical to our way of thinking about intersections, is that nobody approaching this intersection, no leg, believes that they have ultimate priority. And that becomes important in how an intersection is managed. We know that a lot of the problems with intersection is where we have a priority leg who are switched off and just driving along at speed, and then some mistake has happened on the non-priority leg. Now, if you can say that nobody has priority until you've worked it out in there, we see an immediate massive step up in road safety outcome. So everybody approaching this, you know, even with all its sort of design deficiencies in terms of straight lines through it and speed and those sorts of things, everybody approaching looks around, slows down a bit to check, are they safe to proceed? And we've had some really big wins. And certainly, you know, this thing there's no concern about the swept path of larger vehicles and the like, because they simply just go straight over the roundabout. This is kind of the UK equivalent of a four-way stop in the US. But that ultimate vision of priority or assumption of priority can be a challenging thing at an intersection. And in order to address some of these, you know, fast straight line speeds through these roundabouts, which can cause some other issues, you can slow vehicles down using vertical deflection. So, you know, raised platforms and things on the approach to the roundabout. You can get some pretty good outcomes. And yeah, just reminder there, so sort of road safety engineering 101 here, roundabouts, less conflict points. Each dot there is a way you can crash. Now this admittedly is just passenger vehicles we're still talking about. If you add cyclists and pedestrians into that, it changes the mix a little bit, but certainly sort of rural environments, it's pretty clear cut. And I'll talk next week about pedestrian cyclists at roundabouts versus other intersections. But signalisation or other priority controls are a lot of ways that you can crash. The angle of crash, much better in this because energy is deflected out there as opposed to sort of the energy within that other crash. And this is my one to say that when a driver who is half asleep, I don't know, worked a double shift, maybe on drugs or drunk or whatever, you know, all these states that people drive in, which we don't condone, but you've got to just say there's a hell of a lot of that happening. When there's a large lump of infrastructure in the middle of the road, they wake up, they look around, they slow down. It's very, very rare that somebody runs through a roundabout not recognizing that it's an intersection there. I mean, it wakes them up. Although if it's just a set of traffic lights and a red light or, you know, a few aspects, they run straight through it. They don't even, some people don't even know that they've done it. And I won't make you put your hand up if you've gone, hang on, did I just run through a red light? You wake up from your dazed, no memory of driving for the last 3 minutes and just go, what just happened? People drive in all sorts of states. We've got to work on that in other areas, but don't get me wrong, for the rest of our careers, we're going to have people in these states driving. We need to alter the infrastructure to try to alleviate this, or alter the vehicles, alter the system around these people, because getting everybody out there to drive in this always alert, always compliant manner is not going to happen. And just a little aside that not all roundabouts are the same, and we saw the small one with different characteristics, big one, double lane roundabouts, and just for fun, I threw in there turbo roundabouts for those who haven't seen what a turbo roundabout is. I'll show you. This is a little graph just to show the radius, the inner radius of the roundabout, the speed, and we see there's so double lane roundabouts that are small are getting high speeds through there. And high speeds are a decent proxy for crashes usually in most, but as they get bigger, they converge. Single lane roundabouts. A turbo roundabout operates pretty much as a single lane roundabout, but it is a double lane roundabout. And you can see here an example. It's got a raised separator there, and a raised separator, and a raised separator there. So if you want to turn right, you get into the middle there, and you sort of go around that way. And it stops that straight lining through. It stops the cutting across and a lot of the problems we have with double lane roundabouts. Look at this nice one with the bicycle facility going underneath. Isn't that just luxurious? I love it. It's out of the Netherlands, of course, isn't it? There's another turbo, and you can see there, geez, look at the beautiful angle on that conflict there. And the speeds are slow, and we know that everything will be fine with whatever happens in that. But there's turbo just for fun, and I love this one. I mean, the Netherlands, chucking in their massive turbo roundabout here. And I was talking to a Dutch engineer as I had them. This was a few years back. We brought them over to actually talk about cyclists at roundabouts and how, cyclists at intersections and roundabouts especially, and how you can alter roundabouts and those sort of things to cater best for cyclists. And I was just showed him this slide, which I've never seen live, but I said, this just fascinates me. I mean, what a massive land take, and here in Australia, we'd have two big arterial roads like this, and we would either we would probably just have it as a large signalised intersection. It might, unless it was grade separated, but it would probably be a large signalised intersection for a good while. And the Dutch engineer's response was, but what about all the death and serious injury that would happen? I'm like, yeah, I know. I mean, it just could not compute that you would possibly run two high-speed arterial roads at right angles with these high volumes at speed. It just boggled the mind. We would just take it for granted. And, so they're pushing their huge volumes through this, and this is a signalised turbo, and it looks crazy from up here, but I'm sure at ground level it would be somewhat easier to navigate. Signalised, but you can imagine a vehicle approaching this, they know they're going to have to slow down. The geometry says they're going to have to. They're not going to run through there at speed, and we see some great outcomes. And it's really interesting to see some of the concepts coming up for these outer large signalised hotspots for metropolitan Melbourne. This was a concept. This has not been built, but there's really great merit from better alignment with safe system principles for something like this. Again, it looks complicated from up here, and probably why it hasn't been built, because design committees get scared with these sort of things. But every vehicle approaching this is going to have to slow down, is going to have to alter their angle if crashes happen, are going to wake up that they're not blindly sort of running through this intersection. And those who have travelled through signalised roundabouts know that you wake up, you're more alert, you're looking around. So I think we need to continue to look at this, because we must address that severity at these intersections. And that's one of the things with all the answers that were coming in. There were some people who were trying to address the severity. We saw a lower speed limit there, and people were attracted to roundabouts at the start, but they couldn't afford it, or they were worried about unbalanced flows. but we really must start to address the severity at these sorts of intersections. And one way to do that is to start looking at these raised safety platforms, and they address the severity. So the platform itself will address severity. We generally classify it as severity. The traffic signals, if you're placing them around it, also influence the likelihood. And that's what they proposed at that intersection that you were looking at. And they proposed their signalisation, which gives us our likelihood, and severity addressed through the raised platform. So while a lot of you are, extremely good traffic engineers and understand a road network and traffic and operations really well, and you were spot on that everybody went, signalisation is probably what needs to be done here for the unbalanced flow, for the fact that, a number of different reasons. But our commonplace then is to stop at that signalisation and think that, well, people shouldn't run the red lights and hopefully everything will be okay. And we put a fully controlled right turn. So we've, done almost everything, put a red light camera and, but we must address that severity. And so they've gone and said, raise platforms. Could we do that? Now, back, when I started, as an engineer at Vic Roads out in Traralgon many, many moons ago, if I had suggested doing raised anything on a major arterial road, I would have been told to sit in the corner for the day and think about what I just said. But we've evolved from that. We understand now that, this is not an urban speed hump. This is a device to alert people to the change in the road environment at this location, to slow people down on the approach to it. And, buses, heavy vehicles, they can navigate these things. They're going to say they can't, but they can. Absolutely they can. And in fact, this has been built. This has been out there for, 4 years now, and it's performing absolutely fine from that. Heavy vehicles, buses, motorcycles, everything's operating completely fine. And this one's down Surf Coast Kidman, down in Belmont, so outside Geelong for those who want to go visit it. And you'll see here that they've got advisory speeds of 50 kilometres per hour. And why is that? Well, they were predominantly concerned with that right angle crash between passenger vehicles. There is pedestrian activity here. It's not huge. And yes, if we were really trying to get the super high alignment with safe system principles, it would have been much lower for that pedestrian. But there's sort of, I suppose, this acknowledgement of a major arterial and the major risk being passenger vehicle crashes at right angles. And we know the 50 kilometres per hour is that sort of threshold speed we were looking at. And so it's a raised safety platform there. There's the 50 again. It's got lots of advanced warning. Don't worry, that's not the only warning sign. But the community, our whole community was just like, when this idea was first put down, it was like, oh, you can't possibly do that. The rear end crashes will go off the charts. There'll be people, hitting this and losing control and Dukes of Hazzard style stuff, and the trucks will roll over, and there'll be noise, chaos in the residential area with all this. It's all just in our head that this is, these are major concerns. Each one of those things hasn't played out. It's operating fine. There's not excessive noise. The rear ends haven't gone up significantly. There's no loss of control stuff. Admittedly, it's one intersection, and we need to evaluate a proper sample to get, meaningful actual evaluation data out of this sort of stuff, but that's happening. But yeah, it really, to me, says this is how we need to start thinking about likelihood, check. Signals. Severity, not being ignored anymore. Managing the speed, utilizing some raised platforms. And we see, isn't this a beautiful picture? That vehicle slowing down on the approach to a green light. Okay? From a road safety perspective, we are just having massive wins there. That's just wonderful. Also, in terms of the dilemma zone, so the dilemma zone is basically that point as you're approaching a signalized intersection and it goes orange and you are in a dilemma. Do I put the foot down or do I brake? And, you know, there's lots of fun literature on dilemma zone, but we know that these platforms reduce the dilemma zone because most people are going to stop because they know that they're going to have to navigate over this raised platform. So again, wonderful, wonderful benefits from this sort of stuff. But people are so reluctant to do this. And I know, you know, these sort of discussions with my New South Wales colleagues, and I know I've got a few there. It's the traffic ops people are so against these that we need to continue to push and continue to question these decisions to operate large signalized intersections. And I held myself back on LinkedIn from getting really stuck into the removal of a roundabout for a set of traffic signals in New South Wales in one of the regional towns, and it was, you know, so everybody cheering, yay, we're improving the transport efficiency through this. I really want to get into that and say, well, you know, you're going to kill and seriously injure people here. That's a decision. You just traded off the health and safety of your community to get a little bit more travel time efficiency there. And that's just does not align well with safe system principles. It doesn't align with the ethics of safe system. In fact, I'm going to go slightly off script here, Kathy, and I'm going to show a little memo that I used to do at VicRoads, and then I'll pause for questions as well at this time. But this was, you know, in the road safety department, and there was, you know, mass congestion easing program going on. So, and it essentially was out of metro, rip out roundabouts, put in traffic signals, and you know, getting massively high BCRs for traffic efficiency. And I was like, well, you know, we're like, this is not right. And so we started producing this memo, which was this is a template of it, which I kept. Road safety statement. Okay. The Road Safety Department has analysed this project as increasing crashes as follows: 20-year life, the number of deaths attributed to this project 2.3, and little people to remind, we're actually talking about people here. Number of serious injuries attributed to this project 12.6. Statement of acceptance: the above road trauma is accepted by. We used to try to get the regional manager or regional director to sign off. You know, knowingly killing and seriously injuring that amount of people. Of course, we never got any of these signed, and we got very stern talkings to about not understanding the you know, complexity and balancing of a road network and objectives. But we need to boil it down to this sort of clear cut. Right, you're going to make that choice. You want to get a bit more efficiency out of your network, but by killing people, well, sign off on it. Do it. Anyway, I get a bit passionate about this one. Anyway, we've seen some wonderful advances, at least in Victoria in this sense, and I'll show you what that is shortly. Kathy, are there any questions or comments at this stage? I've put up some pretty provocative stuff.
You have. Sounds like you're a challenging employee, Ken.
Oh, yeah. Well, did I leave or was I fired?
Yeah, I know. The story you tell and the reality might be. Anyway, yes, there have been some questions. So just a clarification one on this road safety platform you've got here. So the raised platforms are used to slow vehicles and justify the advisory speed. Is that right?
Yes. So, or to reinforce the advisory speed, you know, okay. It's the same principles as an urban, you know, residential speed hump in the fact that, you know, you're not actually using the ramp to slow. You want people slowing on the approach to it to comfortably be able to navigate that. So these are done because this was a T intersection, as you remember. It's only done on the approach. I'm just gonna go back. It's only been done on the approach. I don't have a drone shot of it, and it's only done for these vehicles that you're trying to slow down. And why is that? That's because they are the bullet vehicles. They are the one that does the damage. These vehicles coming out, they're the target vehicles, and they're not traveling at the speeds to cause death and serious injury. So you don't need to hamper their movement. And you're just simply trying to slow vehicles on the approach, and they navigate this at that 50. We see, yeah, we're seeing likelihood and severity reduction. So,
okay. Earlier there was a question, and you put up a couple of complicated looking roundabouts as well. How effective are they in wet weather, if you know?
Yeah, so I don't know the answer to that. I mean, you're going to have all sorts of detailed things to work through, like heavy vehicles, navigating them in terms of making sure there's not rollover in your drainage, and in terms of vehicles, skid resistance and the like. I mean, but regardless of all those sorts of things, the slowing down of vehicles, the increased alertness, the less conflict points are all going to swamp those sorts of things. We should address those in the details of any designs and installations, absolutely.
What about metered roundabouts?
Yeah, so metering a roundabout to me is just absolutely, should be the first thing you do rather than ripping it out and replacing it with traffic signals. So those who don't know what metering means, it means basically to start to, well, ramp metering is when you go onto the freeway on ramp and there's signals and it sort of, lets you through. A lot of our traffic theory comes from water stuff and, your water meter and those sorts of things. But you put signals on one leg of the roundabout to start with, and then on another leg to just manage your flow and to try and make it better. Absolutely. And in fact, that's what we need to be doing, is extending the life of these roundabouts out as much as possible, using signalisation and the like to keep those benefits before we start to move to these sorts of treatments.
Thank you. We'll just take two more questions at this point. One of the problems with TCS, I'm not sure what the acronym is the lack of information collected, such as approach speed. For example, all red time could be extended if a vehicle was detected approaching at high speed. Yeah,
so that is, yes, so hold the red treatments, which is, that was originally first done in Victoria. Well, I don't know if it was ever first in Victoria, but for those Victorians with us, you used to drive down the Hume and you'd hit the first set of signals at Craigieburn. And that had a horrific, I mean, it was 80 k's an hour or something that you were approaching that, and it had horrific issues with red light running and crashes. And some of the signal engineers at I think it was Broadmeadows at the time, actually came up with the idea that, put your radar, which detects a rogue vehicle that's going to run the red, because obviously, if they're traveling at a certain speed at a certain point, they ain't stopping. And what it would do is, in a certain time, would hold the side roads with red. So it was red on all legs, and then this rogue vehicle would run the red, and it had red light cameras, so they'd get snapped, but at least there wasn't another vehicle. And that's been much more widespread in Queensland of recent times, and they're doing a lot of that work. But those ideas are great. That is a likelihood addresser, though, right? It just adds more to the reduction in likelihood of crashes at that signalised intersection. So, I mean, this sort of order went, add more aspects, do mast arms, make it LED, improve the skid resistance, all of this sort of stuff. Add then in your hold the red treatments. But even with all that, the severity of that crash outcome, when it was still happening, it was happening less. So it was great treatment, but we needed to think about that.
Sorry, one more question before we move on. So council's recently installed several intersections using raised safety platforms. Keen to know how to best evaluate effectiveness besides comparing crash data for before and after.
Yeah. Beautiful question. So crash data is generally unreliable unless you're doing mass studies. Right? People often, use it and they say, oh, we did this intersection treatment and before there were this many crashes and after were this many crashes. don't give that to a statistician, because they'll just tell you how low your confidence in any of that actually is. And in fact, there's a pretty good report on the federal black spot program, which I'm pretty sure the feds hide from anybody who ever wants to see it, because they just go, this black spot program ain't doing much, because we're taking these individual evaluations of low numbers of crashes and to pick the sites. You know, a site with 2 crashes was qualifying at one point, and then they do a treatment, and then afterwards it was no crashes or 1 crash or something like that, and they're calling that a success. Well, the reality, if you're into the stats and maths, it was a regression to the mean, and so actually you get the best PCR for doing nothing, and it most likely on a lot of these sites would have gone back to that. So crashes are not our best predictor of risk in a lot of scenarios. When there are a lot of crashes, and you know, back in the day when it was 20 or so crashes to qualify as a black spot intersection, 20 or so serious injuries and fatalities, I mean, you're onto a bit more of a pattern there, aren't you? But anyway, I slightly digress on that. But evaluation these days, really, there's a few ways to do it. I mean, speed is so correlated to crashes. It's quite amazing. So you can actually get some really good evaluation just by simple stuff with speed on approach before, speed on the approach after, and that gives you actually some pretty good information. And you know, we've got models and things that we can use to then predict fatal serious injury just as a result of that. You can then go to moving to some more advanced ITS style or not ITS, technology style evaluation techniques using the cameras and the conflict point analysis. And certainly anybody who's interested in that, I can put you in contact with some companies that do that sort of analysis. But basically you mount cameras for a week or something like that, and then the automated AI analyzes all the near conflicts and those sort of things. So you can get some pretty good before and after on immediately on those sorts of features as well. A few options there for you. I just want to, I'm going to have to move a little bit quicker, I think, but I want to show you though that, you know, this sort of treatment, and this one just warms my heart for a number of reasons. It's not the most effective, but the idea and the thinking and the pushing is great. So this is Dalton Childs Road, and we're talking a road with 45,000 vehicles a day plus. I think it might even be over 50,000. And bus route, and Childs Road sort of up in the 20-something thousand. So, you know, big volumes here, 20 or 30,000. It was a roundabout, and the roundabout was, you know, saturated. It was not performing well. And so, of course, it was going to get ripped out and put into traffic signals in everybody's mind. But the safe system assessment and the pushing by people in that understanding that we must keep that severity down was that it also came with a raised safety platform. And yes, there was some construction issues and some design issues on the grades and those sorts of things. But the fact that that was implemented with this is just a big, big win. Certainly the slip lanes, and you know, they probably should be a lot lower on there, but you know, little bits and pieces. But those who are interested in some of those, you know, really specific details around the grade of ramps, you know, different speed outcomes you want, the drainage, the consideration of different slopes and those sorts of things, I really suggest you have a look at this Road Design Note 0307 produced by Victorian Government. And we've put that into your memory stick on Schoology. Have a read of it. Great stuff in there, and really help you in a series of environments. I'm just going to touch on this one, which different road environment considerably, and very much one in these rural areas. You know, no pedestrian cyclist activity, and this is an area of high risk, 100 km/h in each direction, and an intersection, and the arterial road sort of goes around there. And this is a Telstra exchange building thing, which costs an arm and a leg to move, and the land acquisition and things to get a full-size roundabout. It's a B-double route around this area. So, you know, the region saying we want to, address the risk here, and how do we do it? Everybody wants a roundabout. We can't afford the roundabout. It has a huge land take and reverse curves on the approach, which is what it's done in Victoria. And the temptation would have been to go with just a right turn facility or something like that and reduce that likelihood only. But they pushed for that roundabout and to try to fit it in with the constraints, went with compact roundabout. Okay, so this roundabout is actually quite small. It has straight approaches as opposed to the reverse curves. But again, they've used vertical deflection here, raised platforms, to slow vehicles down. And you'll see here, there's the, Telstra thing that didn't move. And look at the tiny circulating bit of the roundabout. That's the roundabout. The rest of it is a concrete apron, so the large vehicles can sweep around that. But this is like, I feel so, again, important that severity of the outcome was this major factor in pushing for this, rather than the easy options, which would have been to start to address the likelihood. Okay, quiz time, Kathy, and stand up, have a stretch as well while you do the quiz. I think it's only one question, just to keep you all on your toes. And hopefully that'll pop up on your screen shortly. And if it doesn't pop on your screen, there it is. If it doesn't pop up on your screen, I'll read it out to you. So, true or false, traffic signals are not safe system. True, false, what? Unintelligible question. Unintelligible meaning that doesn't really make sense as a question. A little bit of a tricky question here, and I think that's good because it may clarify a couple of things that I feel are myths within the safe system.
Might just close that one off in a couple more seconds.
Now, remember, you don't get marked on these as such. They're just to get a feel for that, to get the interaction. You'll have a proper quiz at the end of this, which will be in Schoology. Okay, true, false, or unintelligible question. Well, really, I was going for unintelligible question here, and that's for a couple of reasons. I talked about safe system or not safe system being fairly unintelligible. It is a spectrum. If I'd say traffic signals, no, actually, that would still be unintelligible. And the other reason for that is it's not about the traffic signals. It's not about the roundabout. It's about the management of the energy, okay? So yes, utilizing traffic signals in high-speed environments with nothing to slow or improve angles doesn't align very well with safe system principles. But using traffic signals in a low-speed environment, a lower speed environment with some other features around it, aligns really well with safe system principles. So it's not about traffic signals as such. So, one of the myths I hear a lot is, oh, yeah, safe system. Yeah, I know about that. Yeah, it's just all roundabouts and wire rope safety barrier. They're just two things that, in certain circumstances, align well with safe system principles. So don't think the output and the outcome are the same in this sense. Thanks, Kathy. We can get rid of that, and I'll keep ticking along. But please pop your questions into the chat or raise your hand. Happy to continue to chat. Anything we don't have time to cover, I can follow up with some emails to answer questions, or we can have a chat offline, or I can point you at some different research or pipelines of the like. All right, lane departure. So here we go. We've got a road. Could be anywhere in Australia, couldn't it? Most of a huge amount of Australia looks kind of like this, and we've got a high-speed road, and it's got a centre line dividing it, and it's got some field shoulders. It's got a road reserve there with some trees and The occasional side road. Okay, you know pretty much nothing about this intersection. Sorry, this length of road. Just jot into the comments what types of crashes do you believe are causing death and serious injury on this 200 kilometres or so of road that looks exactly pretty much like this all the way? What types of crashes result in death or serious injury?
No prizes for this one, Ken?
Oh, yeah, I'll give it a prize. The first person that said runoff road.
That one goes to Negan.
Again, well done. So runoff road, and let's give a prize to the first person who said head-on crashes. I don't know, did anybody say that?
Jellica.
Jelly gets a prize as well. Yes, runoff road and head-on crashes. I mean, and the thing is that there might be little areas that increase the risk a bit. So maybe, you know, a little kink in the road or a curve increases the risk of runoff road a bit. But there is risk throughout this. And, you know, you do any analysis of these long routes like this of high speed, and it's sort of just death and serious injury dotted along it, depending on where people fell asleep or got distracted or, one reason or another. So, you know, in one sense, we have to treat this all as a high risk. But the challenge we've got is that there's so much of this network out there that how do we utilize our minimal resources to most effectively address this? And we obviously hone that back to some of the key risk factors and where we're going to put large expensive treatments. The biggest risk factors are two, and they are speed and volume. That's your end sort of risk game. Then there's more refined ones, and depending on how refined you want to go in your analysis of risk. See, certainly the IRAP methodology, which we do a lot of IRAP star rating assessments and the like, you got to plug in 64 variables basically to get your star rating. But you know, there's some of those variables that significantly alter things, and there's some that aren't so big at all. But we know that the roadside hazards are extremely severe in the outcomes. We talked last week about the ANCAP 5-star safety rating for site impact in Nepal only being done at 29 kilometres per hour. So, you know, the presence of trees and power poles and things, if crashes happen, they are so severe, they're so violent, these crashes. Like here's one predicted at 60 kilometres per hour into a power pole. And the violence of that, at that speed, considering we drive 100, 110 around these all the time, and our safe system says mistakes are going to happen. It just is not a mix that aligns highly. I've got a number of different graphs here about the idea of clearing hazards in the roadside all the way back. And there's merit to that because it reduces risk, right? You see there the risk. So this is clear zone, area free of hazards from the edge line out. And this is runoff road casualty crash risk per 100 million vehicle kilometres traveled. You see it goes down, but you see it asymptotes out. And I've got lots and lots of research and documentation around that for anybody interested. But we know that, these big wide clear zones and keeping clearing is not necessarily a safe place to be. We know that people go beyond these large clear zones. We know rollover crashes happen even within these areas. And so what we're saying is that wide clear zones don't have the highest alignment with safe system principles, and just practically very hard to achieve with, vegetation removal, all the legislation around that. And then the cost of these sorts of things. But, you do get advantage in the first, few meters of clearing. But these sorts of roads, like this is Benalla bypass, right, which was built, I can't remember how long ago, But if you were actually to get the Austroads Guide to Road Design series from 6 months ago, in fact, from 3 months ago, it would take you down a path of building a town bypass duplication pretty much like this, which would have big sealed shoulders, audio tactile edge line, yeah, that's great. And you know, you'd have all your hazards at whatever clear zone you calculated. And the fact is here that all of the stuff associated with that is addressing the likelihood of crashes. The audio tactile, the sealed shoulders, the clear zone, median clear zone, the big wide median here, all addressing the likelihood of crashes. Luckily now, with the release of the new Austroads Guide to Road Design Part 6, we're starting to see more emphasis on severity of crashes, which is great. And that's the document, and I really encourage you to have a look at that, because pretty much clear zones are gone. So there is no more looking at that table of clear zone and calculating your clear zone and saying, well, it's a 9 meter clear zone and that hazard is at 9.1 meters, so everything's okay. And that's great from a logical perspective, isn't it? I mean, the insanity of us ever thinking that a hazard at 9.1 was not a hazard and a hazard at 8.9 was a hazard. I mean, we know that risk sort of drops off at different rates, and that is acknowledged in this, and there are lots of risk tables about how risk changes with different features, and acknowledging that it doesn't disappear at some arbitrary number, it just continues to alter in its path. So I think it's a sort of logical step, and we finally got there with the release of the new Part 6. But really, I mean, in terms of alignment with safe system principles, this is a really simplistic, easy sort of thing to show there. But barrier systems are our major friend in this. Flexible barrier systems for passenger vehicles are really where we're going, and these sort of full containments have the highest alignment with safe system principles in one way or another. So you know, somebody in one of my workshops in the barrier training, I think, calls it the bumper bowling of roads. You know, you're not gonna, you know, no matter what happens, you're sort of contained within that. And that's great alignment with safe system principles, because it just acknowledges that people are going to fall asleep. They're going to look at their phone. They're going to turn around to look at the screaming kids or whatever it is, and they're going to leave their lane. And what we need to do is manage that mistake. We're going to try and stop them making that mistake. That'd be nice. And, you know, we'll do lots of campaigns, but don't get fooled into or caught up in that idea that people will, you know, that our answer is to fix all these mistakes and stop them happening. We need to work on that, but we need to manage the energy of mistakes. And so it sort of goes down. There's, you know, different alignments with safe system principles as you get different volumes and a few other things. But, you know, those are just a general bit of an idea. And there are lots of different cross sections being produced. These are some of the New South Wales cross sections, and we won't get caught up in the details of offset to barrier too much and those sort of things. But like, isn't this one interesting? It's a bit hard to see there, but 4-star IRAP and 5-star IRAP, and this is pretty much the way we were producing roads with the big wide median. And look, even just the land take difference. If you are building these as, you know, new roads or the like, you get a better safety outcome with less land, unless you, I suppose, we're planning to widen that into, you know, 3 lanes in each direction in the future or something like that. But yeah, I think that's just some interesting stuff, and there's lots of those out there. I'm not going to go through. They're in your notes. You can have a look at them. The offset to barrier, though, is a very contentious and interesting thing, and we need to consider that in these rural environments. And we certainly learned our lesson in Victoria with the rollout of many hundreds of kilometres of barrier at these, you know, 1-2 metre offsets and the like, and having some huge challenges and pushback from the community. So we need to acknowledge that into our thinking and barrier design. And you know, these sort of pictures tell the story. The actual reality of the risk is fairly low for people who break down and have to straddle into the lane. I mean, but there is a risk there, and it's unacceptable to the community. So we need to just design and manage that. The actually, before I jump into just one device, which looks at the severity of crashes, I might just take a pause to see if there's any questions or comments at this stage, Kathy.
No, Kent, we just we'll update the slides in Schoology, the presentation in there, just to reflect exactly what's being presented here after this session.
Okay.
Just an admin item.
Right. Okay. We'll do that. I think thought they were fairly close. It might have been. I might have slipped. I sometimes slip in a new slide here and there when something new pops out in, like say the Ostro's guide or that.
Yep.
Sure that it's up to speed at the very last minute.
Thanks.
Just to keep Kathy on her toes. Yeah. Okay. So Raptor Cushion is just one example of another product that's sort of really addressing that severity of crashes. Now, for those who aren't familiar with a Raptor Cushion is a product that sits around a power pole, and it has a bit of cushioning to it, but it predominantly provides its severity reduction by the rotation and the deflection of energy. So as a vehicle leaves the road and hits that, it rotates as the vehicle hits it and pushes the energy or the vehicle away from the point source hazard being the power pole. And I often use the analogy, it's like martial arts, where the energy of the punch is deflected away. Not that I have ever done martial arts, but I watched the Karate Kid, so that's the answer. But again, it's thinking about how do we manage the energy of this crash, so it's not an instantaneous redirection of the energy into the occupant of the vehicle. And so, just I think a wonderful sort of example of a feature that does this. And I picked that one because it's obvious, but there's many ways that we can be doing this, and I think it's the area for us to continue to innovate. Energy management within the system. And again, here you see that this is severity. When you're doing a safe system assessment, if you see that they're planning to put Raptor cushions around these, you're altering the severity of the crash. You're doing nothing for the likelihood of the crash, because them leaving the road and then hitting that's the crash. Okay, you're doing nothing for the exposure to the crash, because that's the number of vehicles that are there. You're just addressing that severity. Quiz time, and then I'm going to tell you a little assignment that you're going to have to do. You're going to have a little bit of homework, but don't get concerned. It's a lot of homework. So let's just pop up our quiz there, Kathy. I think it's only one question again, just to check again, just to clarify. You're starting to get your head around some of the stuff we're talking about. And the question for anybody who can't see it: sealed shoulders, improve road safety, true, false, or unintelligible question. Seeing lots of answers come in. And we've probably got about 15 minutes to go, so.
Just 5 more seconds. Great, thank you. I'll just close that one off.
Okay, so sealed shoulders improve road safety. Well, that is true, as most of you said there. They very much do improve road safety. They do that by reducing the likelihood of crashes. So if people leave the road, they're more likely to recover, not have that crash. So the reason I popped that in there again was sort of to say, even though we're not addressing the severity, it still improves road safety. So don't get that wrong. But it's just not going to address the severity of the crash. And to get us the highest alignment with safe system principles, we need to address both the likelihood and the severity of the crash, and if possible, the exposure to crashes, which is often very much the hardest thing to do. So thank you for answering them. Thanks for the continual input. So that's where we needed to get to in terms of predominantly the passenger vehicle thinking around crashes. What I'm going to get you to do after this module is, yes, you're going to have to do the quiz, and you've got I think 9 questions or something to answer, and one will be how many Wallies did you see? How many times did Wally appear on the slides? And you get a little bit of tolerance with Wally, as you would have discovered last week. But the next thing I want you to do is a fairly quick little exercise, which is not that dissimilar to the intersection challenge we did, but it's actually a lot easier and quicker. And in Schoology, on your memory stick, in Module 2 folder, you will find this Word document. And all you're going to do is type a few words into this Word document and then upload it to Schoology. And Kathy can help you with that if you have any challenges. And if you really can't work that out, you can email it through as a last resort. But we do want it uploaded in Schoology. Ideally, PDF it and then upload it. It's just easier for us to read at our end. But there's instructions in here. It says that the first thing we want you to do is pick an intersection. It could be any intersection. It could be the intersection out the front of your house or out the front of the office. It could be an intersection you remember, you know, from a holiday you're on that you thought was particularly dangerous or, you know, particularly good. Whatever you know, any intersection will do. It doesn't matter. You fill out the information that's highlighted and then you inspect the site. And we're just going to let you do this by a street view this time. So, or, you know, photos or whatever so you don't need to physically go there. If it's out the front of your house, you probably can easily have a look at it that way. And then we want you to fill out the table that's on the next page. And that's all you're going to have to do. So there, the highlighted bits, you're going to put your name, you're going to chuck a link to the intersection. So when we go to mark it, we can have a quick look at what you're talking about. And then you're going to fill out this very simple 6 cells of this table. The first thing you're going to do is, okay, factors that increase or influence exposure to crashes. And so minimum 1, maximum 3. Now, we've been talking about this a lot. Exposure is the number of vehicles, the number of pedestrians, the number of cyclists, the number of motorcyclists, whatever it is. So really what's influencing that is going to be the volume or the, you know, it's a high volume road or it's got a lot of pedestrians because it's on the desire line from the station to the shopping centre or whatever it is, you know. But that should be very easy for you. It's going to be something related with traffic or volume or pedestrian volume or cyclist volume. Likelihood, again, 1 to 3 factors that influences the likelihood of crashes at this intersection or influences the likelihood. So that could be anything, you know, like the sight lines to the intersection, the sight distance or the presence of signals or the skid resistance or faded line marking or confusing signage or what you know, all of those sorts of things are likelihood factors. And then severity, factors that influence the severity of the crash. And yeah, we said they're most likely going to be the speed, the angles, the presence of, you know, the vulnerability of road users, the point source hazards or those sorts of things. And then you simply give us one thing, only one thing that you could change or alter about that intersection that would influence the exposure, the likelihood, and the severity. Just one thing. And again, your exposure thing is going to have to alter the volume of traffic or pedestrians or cyclists or motorcyclists that go through that intersection. And the likelihood and the severity you'll hopefully work out. So it is a fairly simple exercise in terms of time. I wouldn't expect this will take you very long at all. And in fact, if you're confused about it, we would rather you get on the phone to myself quickly rather than spending a long time scratching your head and getting frustrated about this. We're here to help you through this, to get this clear in your mind, because you must be able to categorize things like this in order to do a safe system assessment. That's the reason why we're using this. This is the first step into the assessment framework. So you've got a good base understanding of safe system. You're understanding these categorization and treatments and analyzing intersections. And we haven't got to scoring any of this yet and exactly some of the other nuances, but this is a good first step. So I'll open it up to any questions about the task you have at hand.
Just waiting for some questions to come through. Now's a good time to ask them.
Well, I like the question, Kathy, if others aren't going to ask it. When's it due?
Good question. Thanks, Ken. So before our next session, ideally, which is next Tuesday. So really what we want to do is get this from you so that Ken can have a look through and give you some feedback before you head out to do your safe system assessment. So that way we make sure you've got it, you're on the right track, that side of things. So ideally by next Tuesday, and as Ken mentioned as well, if you've got any concerns, just give us a call. Can you give us some more examples of lowering the exposure of an intersection, Ken? What else have you got?
So to address the exposure to an intersection, you would have to either eliminate that exposure through a grade separation, or you would have to block off the intersection, parts of the intersection, to bring the number of vehicles going through the intersection down. So that may be to close a side road off, or close some side roads off, divert them to other intersections or the like. Or, you know, thinking a bit outside the square could be things like to create public transport alternatives, which reduce the traffic volume. I mean, I haven't constrained you at all in this one. I mean, that kind of thing would be a constraint if you're doing an actual safe system assessment on a project, because it's beyond probably the realms of any sphere of influence that the project team would have. But it's anything to alter that volume of traffic. So again, I mean, pedestrians or cyclists, you could be creating fully separated shared path facilities that are well away from the road or protected by barrier systems, and but they're going to have to cross through the intersection, which leaves them exposed to it. So maybe they go under it or over it, or yeah, no, there's a few different. And if it was a T intersection like the one we were looking at, it could be a completely off-road separated shared path on the side that doesn't have to cross the intersection at all, or something like that, and you change the exposure to crashes from that perspective. So hopefully that helps you, gives you a few ideas there. Any other questions from participants? You've done very well there. You got a lot of different ideas, and there's some of the documents we referred to which are in your memory stick, and we could talk a lot about some of those other things. Remember to do the quiz, and remember to finish your assignment, PDF it if you've got that capability, upload it to Schoology, and you will be marked on that assignment. Remember, you have a few attempts, so if you don't do so well and have missed the mark somehow, you will be able to have a resubmit on that. And remembering that you have to get an 80% average mark over the assignments and quizzes to be a certificate at the end of this course. But we're here to help you make sure you do that. Okay, Kathy, anything else from you?
No, just as you mentioned, Ken, there is a submit assignment button in once you get into that assignment. So if you're having any troubles, do get in touch with me. Google Chrome seems to be the best friend of Schoology, so that usually fixes most things. But yeah, no, I think that's about it. So unless there's any other last minute burning questions, maybe we'll let everyone go a little bit early today.
Well, you'll be able to knock off the assignment before midday, maybe. All right, thanks everybody, and remember, 5 minutes before the next module, log in, trivia, chance to win a prize, and Kathy's keeping track of who's won prizes.
Right, there's lots of prize winners in this group. Well done.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you. Bye.